Welcome to our neighborhood farm. People and communities across the nation and the world are realizing the benefits of growing and eating from local sources. In this video, we'll explore some of the best practices you might consider when planning your neighborhood farm. First, what is a neighborhood farm? A neighborhood farm is a model for creating food self-sufficiency within a community. In a broad sense, a neighborhood farm has multiple members who participate in the planning, organizing, and maintaining of a communal vegetable garden. By sharing both the expense and the labor, the members benefit from working together to achieve production on a scale that they might not be able to accomplish individually. The old cliché, "many hands make light work," is certainly true when it comes to raising a farm full of veggies. You may have heard of CSAs, community-supported agriculture. In the typical CSA, members purchase shares and depend on a local farmer to provide seasonal produce regularly throughout the growing season. In addition to vegetables, some CSAs may also include other farm products such as eggs, chickens, or cheese. The neighborhood farm concept is similar, except that each member is also the farmer. Besides getting access to very fresh and nutritious food, farm members learn new skills and frequently develop a stronger sense of community. Gardening provides an opportunity to be active and burn off some calories in the process. Working together to create and maintain a productive farm is very rewarding, and by working together, some of the farm chores somehow seem more fun than work. What are some of the key elements that lead to a successful neighborhood farm? First of all, you need organized leadership. Second, there is a financial investment made by the members. And third, members participate in weekly work days when the garden is tended and the fruits and vegetables are harvested and distributed. The farm members need a leader, someone in charge. Over time, the leadership may change, but the garden leader should have gardening expertise as well as time to procure materials, plan, and organize work days. This person must be able to answer questions, make decisions, coordinate activities, and communicate with the rest of the members. Typically, a leader's time investment may average 5 hours a week beyond the time spent during work days at the garden. Usually, this leadership comes from within the community, but some neighborhood farms have found it beneficial to have someone from outside the community who can provide the necessary expertise and experience. Not sure who could help you to get started? The University of Maryland has an extensive Master Gardener program that has dedicated volunteers who are willing and able to provide guidance to communities getting started with their neighborhood farm. These Master Gardeners usually have years of experience as well as extensive training in many aspects of gardening. They also have a strong network and can usually find answers to gardening questions that arise during the growing season. The University of Maryland has an extensive online resource at the Home and Garden Information Center at www.hgic.umd.edu. Alternatively, there are also experts for hire. These folks usually have experience in vegetable gardening and frequently in community organizing. Always obtain and verify references before deciding to hire an external expert. The shared financial investment is determined by the number of members, the size of the garden, structural needs, any installation and ongoing operational costs, and possibly the expense of a paid leader. For example, 25 members in the Eric Waller Community Garden in Mount Washington, which is managed as a neighborhood farm, in its first year paid $70 each. Expenses decreased after that first year, and so in successive years they paid $50 a year. The fee helps to pay for items that need to be purchased, such as seeds, mulch, tools, fencing, hoses, compost, cages, fertilizer, and so on. The garden expanded to 50 members in its second season. At the end of the season, it was estimated that each member had received produce worth about $500. Perhaps more important than the financial commitment is the labor commitment. Each household or member agrees to share not just expenses, but also the labor. All work and harvesting occur on work days where everyone is expected to attend. The harvest is then divided only among the members present. Obviously, it is improbable that all members will make every work day, but when necessary, members should be allowed to send a substitute who will work in the garden and collect their share. What are some structural best practices that successful neighborhood farms follow? First of all, these farms only raise easy-to-grow crops. Crop selection may eventually branch out, but to be successful the first year, it is advisable not to be too adventurous. The gardens have mounded raised beds and ideally have automatic irrigation, and the gardens should be fenced. A low-cost fence goes a long way in protecting the garden from unwanted visits from neighborhood dogs, roaming deer, and other furry creatures. What should the farm grow? Grow vegetables that have the best yield for the amount of space they require. Beans or beets give a much higher yield than corn or melon. Other best bets when starting out are tomatoes, lettuce, peppers, spinach, summer squash, and eggplant. Also zucchini, cucumbers, Swiss chard, basil, collards, kale, radishes, and turnips. Do some research to determine which varieties grow well in your area. The University of Maryland's Grow It, Eat It website at growit.umd.edu has a wealth of information about vegetables, their preferred growing conditions, plant diseases, and resources on other garden-related subjects. So how much space do you need for a neighborhood farm? And where do you locate your garden? Most vegetables typically need a minimum of 6 hours of direct sunlight, so don't position the garden in the middle of the neighborhood woods. Observe potential locations at different times of the day to estimate how many hours of sunlight the vegetables will receive. Vegetables need a steady supply of water, and Mother Nature cannot always be relied upon. A really important consideration is being close to a water supply. Here you might need to be creative. The Radnor-Winston Community Garden depends on a tap at their next-door neighbor, a property owned by Loyola University. Gardens should receive thorough soakings, generally in the early morning. You can use a drip or overhead system. Consider also investing in a timer to water automatically on a schedule. The expense of a watering system varies with its size and complexity, but generally systems can be purchased for under $400. When just starting out, have the soil tested for heavy metals and for pH. You can send samples to universities such as Penn State, who for a nominal fee will run basic tests on the soil. Neighborhood farms should use mounded raised beds. You must eliminate the existing grass and weeds. There are several methods for doing this. You can physically remove the sod, you can smother the grass with heavy layers of newspaper, or you can use a chemical such as Roundup. Most likely you will also need to have some soil or mushroom compost delivered to the farm site. You may need to amend the soil with some nutrients based on the result of your soil lab analysis. Almost all vegetables prefer well-drained soil, rich in organic matter, and pH neutral to slightly acidic. You might consider starting a compost pile as one of the first acts in planning for the garden. People often wonder how much produce can a neighborhood farm produce. Of course, it depends on the size of the garden, the weather, and the collective effort of its farmers. It also depends on what vegetables are grown. In planning your farm, try to estimate how many zucchini each household can absorb. Planning for high yield and consistent harvests is one area where expert leadership is important. Stagger the plantings and the varieties of produce to ensure that each week there is something to harvest and never an overwhelming quantity of one item. Neighborhood farms will also find that throughout the year there will be times when their bounty is so great they can share the results with neighborhood food pantries and other organizations. How much acreage do you need to have a successful farm? Acres? Not really. Numerous books with titles such as The Quarter Acre Farm explain that a neighborhood farm doesn't need to be large to be successful. Gardeners have many methods for getting the most from their limited land space. You really don't need a large space. In fact, the first year you might start out small and use only a portion of the available space. You can work to improve the unused space by enriching it with compost and perhaps growing a cover crop to add nutrients to the soil and improve the soil's fertility. How can you obtain some space for the farm? Cities such as Baltimore have programs to help communities establish gardens on abandoned lots. Frequently there are benefits to the landowner to not have an empty lot, and they may be willing to allow you to farm their land. In Baltimore City, if the land is owned by the city, citizens can apply for land use through the Adopt a Lot program. In speaking with your neighbors and friends, you may often hear that they too are interested in healthful fresh food from the garden, but that they are intimidated by starting their own garden. The neighborhood farm is a good way to learn together while sharing the work. The results from your neighborhood farm will be much greater than the sum of your individual efforts. Working and having fun together on the farm will provide you with a much better chance of gardening success. How can I learn more? Visit the University of Maryland's websites. Check out the Home and Garden Information Center at www.hgic.umd.edu and the Grow It, Eat It website at growit.umd.edu. These websites are full of how-to videos and other reference materials. You can even send in photos of insects or plants for identification, or have an expert answer your gardening questions.